Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's the creepiest thing a child has ever said to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When my daughter was about 3, she told me she missed her old life when she lived in the trees. I asked her what she meant, and she said, "Before you were my mummy, I was an owl and lived in the trees. I love you, but I miss my owl mummy." And less creepy, but just funny, this morning when I was still asleep, my 6-year-old came into our room and whispered into my ear, "I know how to grow potatoes." No idea what put the thought into his head, nor why he felt the need to tell me at 6 a.m. Not necessarily creepy, but it left me feeling strange. My daughter was maybe 3 years old, going on 4 at the time, and we were having a moment alone in my bed, just relaxing together as I combed my fingers through her hair. She looked at me and said, "I'm glad I picked you from the mom box." I said, "What do you mean, mom box?" And she said, "I picked you out of a long row of mom boxes. I almost picked another mom. She had yellow hair, but I picked you because you look so nice. And then I was born, and you were my mom." She said it very matter-of-factly, and it gave me goosebumps in the moment. It could definitely be chalked up to a child's imagination, but I've never forgotten it or the feeling it gave me. She's 10 now and has no recollection of it. I was in a public bathroom stall, and probably 8 years old child started singing in front of my stall. "I can see you from behind, you can hear me in your mind, run so fast and you can go, time will catch you before you know." I came out of the stall, said her hair was really pretty, and she growled creepily, "Thank you, I like yours too," and ran out giggling. When my son was a toddler, he talked about the melting man and the 2 skeletons standing in his room. He thought the melting man was funny, and he always walked around where each of the 3 stood. He did this for months until one night at like 2 a.m., he woke screaming while staring at the ceiling. His head and eyes darted around as he watched the melting man move up there. We went to the living room, and he was fine for a moment until the melting man came on the ceiling from the out of the hallway. I couldn't calm him, so we went to a 24-hour Walmart for 3 hours. He was absolutely fine while out of the house, but it started right back up when we got back home. That became the first time that we fully cleansed the house. You can knock it as much as you'd like. It stopped. He never spoke about the melting man or the skeletons again, and that was 6 years ago now. We never brought it up again either. We never knew if it would cause issues again, if it were to bring it up. The past few weeks, he's been complaining about nightmares of a cow with its face melting off. He refuses to tell me anything more about it though. Here's to hoping it isn't a repeat of back then. When I was younger, 5 to 7-ish, I knew that my great-grandma had died before anyone else did, and drew a picture of her with X's for eyes, and I told my mom and dad that she had passed, and no one believed me until they dropped me off at school and got the call. It still freaks my family out so bad. When my daughter was about 3, she told us she didn't want to sleep in her room anymore. She said there was a little boy that stood in the corner of her room looking at her sometimes. She described him quite well: small, white, messy blonde hair, wearing a red jumper, white socks, and no trousers on. Years later, we realized the local school uniform has bright red jumper, and then a few years later, I was talking to my elderly neighbor who had lived in her house opposite mine since 1973. I told her about that funny story about the little boy. She frowned and said, "Are you talking about Alan?" Apparently there was a little blonde boy that lived in our house in the 80s in my daughter's room. He's still alive. He's a little older than me. I'd love to track him down and ask him if, when he was little, if he saw a little girl on his bed. Well, it's not something they said because the baby was too small to speak, but one of my relatives knew a person who owed them a lot, and that person died, and somehow, don't ask, shady, his huge house got to be in the possession of my relative. I went over once for tea, and I was shocked. The house was huge. It had like 3 to 4 bedrooms. There was a huge gallery with the rooms, and downstairs an enormous living room and a terrace and a swimming pool. So yeah, actually beautiful. They had a baby not long ago, and while we were talking and hanging out in the living room, the baby started looking at the top corner of the living room and giggling. I was like, "Hey, cute, she can do that already?" And the mom freaked out right away. She jumped to the baby and turned her around to face the other direction. And now was my shock. The baby turned back as much as she could with the head and continued to giggle and smile in the same direction. For your information, that corner in that same direction, the corner was empty. It was the only corner where there was no gallery, just plain white wall. So I asked what this was about, because now the baby was really acting weird. And they explained how they got the house, and that the old owner hung himself there. Oh yeah, it didn't take more than a year for them to decide to move out. It wasn't exactly creepy to me, but my daughter told me matter-of-factly at around 2 to 3 years old that she used to have a mom named Lisa last time she was alive. She said they lived in a greenhouse. Her other mom was very nice, gave lots of hugs, and had 5 other children. But then Lisa died, so she came back, and I became her mom. She told me Lisa had both red hair and red eyes. She said it with extra emphasis on the eye color. We had never talked with her about past lives or death, so it was curious. I was pregnant with my son at the time, and she also insisted and told everyone that her brother's name was Arkano the person, because she used to have a farm dog named Arkano, a different time she was alive. When I say she told everyone, I mean strangers in grocery stores, her preschool teachers, her doctor. We got a lot of perplexed looks. One of my favorites was when she was around 6 years old in the dead of winter and was hanging upside down from a climber we had set up in the living room. She was quiet and just hanging by her knees and suddenly said, "Mom, what if this is all God's dream?" I know we've done this topic a few times across the 5 years we've been doing this together. I enjoy it, and a lot of it's, funny or silly or just an expression of youthful imagination, but, some of these kids talking about past lives and choosing their moms, etc., it's creepy, I'm sure. Hearing that as a mother or father would freak you out, but I also think it's kind of beautiful in a way. So, I don't know. What do you think? My almost 2-year-old would wake up screaming and say, "Man in ceiling," when I asked what's wrong. At the time, her bedroom door had glass panels she could see through, directly to the hallway where the attic door was. I had woken up a few days earlier to the attic door slightly open. It was way too heavy for any of us to lift, and we couldn't reach it anyway, as we didn't have a ladder. Moved out soon after, just in case it was a real man in the ceiling, and not a ghost. I was a nanny for a couple years for a kiddo who was autistic and would often repeat words from TV shows, movies, ads, songs to express himself. One day, I turned around to see him covered in blood. It was all over his face, shirt, hands, arms. My heart stopped, but I just thought, don't freak out. If you freak out, he'll freak out. So I said, "Hey buddy, where'd all that blood come from? Are you hurt?" His response, through gritted teeth, his usual scripting tone, "I will kill you." It turned out he had been picking his nose and jabbed himself real good with a fingernail. The statement was likely a response to seeing the blood and making a connection to a movie he'd seen, but still. Another one, my cousin when he was little had an imaginary friend, and it was this old man who really just played with him when he was lonely, and was always really kind guy from the experiences my cousin talked about. We think it was this old man who died in the house before him, but freaky but wholesome because he would stop my cousin from crying at night, and just small things to make it easier on a single mom with a baby. I've taught special education preschool to high school and done therapy for all ages for several years. So honestly, nothing scares me anymore, to be honest, lol. But here are some early experiences that gave me a shiver. 1. 4-year-old girl drawing circles with crayon, hair covering her face, launched her over the table when I tapped her and said, "Hey, what are you drawing?" She giggled, not normally how she used to then, started drawing a bigger circle of paper on the table, almost breaking the crayon. She was pushing so hard, I asked her again and said, "Kid's name, can you please tell me? I really like to know, and maybe I can get you more paper and we can't draw on the table." She flipped her head up, looked sideways at me, and in a very deep, almost male voice said, "I'm drawing the circle of hell that child's name is trapped in." She then flipped her hair back, continued drawing, and then just stopped, stood up, came over, gave me a hug, and went on to play on a slide with other kids, never happening again. 2. 6-year-old girl came in with a presenting psychosis symptoms, ex-blurry of trauma and PTSD and schizophrenia, sat at the play tea time table and had a full, almost adult-level conversation with 3 various persons. This is common behavior for psychosis, but what was stupefying was that one of the people she talked to was a pilot from the 9/11 attack. He said how he was honored to fly. He loved his wife and kids, and hoped that some of his passengers would survive using emergency exits. As far as I or parents were aware, she had never been told about the attacks or what happened. She'd never been on a plane, nothing. And she was able to tell the exact date the male pilot died. We asked her at a later session about 9/11, and she had no understanding or memory about the date. 3. More of a heartwarming one was when a student's mother was diagnosed with cancer. She was a single mother of 4, and doctors didn't foresee positive outcome even with chemo. She said she would pray daily to Mary and just hoped for a miracle. One day at pickup, her 5-year-old son comes out to my classroom and hands her a picture he drew. She smiles and asks where it is of. He giggles, saying, "You know, Mommy," and she smiles, saying, "No, sweetie, tell me." And he says, "It's of you in bed last night, when the beautiful lady in blue came and gave you a kiss on your belly. Then the sun got bright and the lady left." We both looked a bit confused, but thought maybe a mixture of dreams or TV or just high stress. Well, no lie, the mom went to the doctor later that week and was told she was clear. It was nothing short of a miracle, the doctors claimed. To this day, the mom is certain that her son saw Mother Mary in blue visit her in her sleep and cure her. What a sweet and magical thought. My first apartment was in an old monastery, and rumor has it that the nuns there would sleep with the monks and have children together. I explored the basement, not allowed. I was very curious, and I found tiny beds in the basement with the words "boy" painted on the wall with blue paint. My sister and her 2 kids at the time had an apartment just across the enclosed courtyard. I was watching my 5-year-old niece while my sister went to work, and I heard her talking in her room to someone. I peered in her room to find her talking to someone while she colored on her plastic little tyke's table, looking across the table, just having a whole conversation. I asked her what she was doing, and she stated, "I'm just coloring with my friend. He's a blue color and comes and goes throughout the house." Ironic, or was my niece really seeing a blue boy, as she would say? I know young children are more sensitive to things like this, and often are reported seeing ghosts, spirits, etc. What's your opinion on this? My ex-father-in-law passed away when our daughter was 4. About a month after, I was in the kitchen doing dishes while my daughter sat on the floor beside me playing. It was midsummer, so very warm. All of a sudden I felt cold and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Right at that moment, my daughter looked up at me and asked me why Grandpa was just standing there. I told her Grandpa was in heaven. She said, "No, he's not, Mommy. He's standing right behind you." My son was about 3. He asked me to come into his room, lie down on his bed, and close my eyes. I was suspicious and a little reluctant because of this behavior. He was being overly sweet and reassuring. So I lie down and close my eyes. Then he says, "Now just lie still. This won't hurt a bit." I open my eyes to see him standing over me with a toy hammer in one hand and a toy saw in the other. I noped out of there real fast. Kindergarten teacher here. One time a little boy very confidently told me, "My daddy is picking me up today, but not my old daddy, my new daddy. My old daddy gave me to my new daddy a long time ago. Old daddy had red skin and funny-looking feet, and he doesn't like it when I talk about him. And this one, my mommy had a baby in her belly, but the baby came out and fell into the fire. Mom had a miscarriage a few weeks before." Not to me, but when my younger brother was 3, he climbed up on our mother's lap and whispered into her ear, "I wish you were dead because then you'd be green and that's my favorite color. He's special." Edit. Just remembered my girlfriend's mom telling me how my girlfriend's entire toddler years were spent narrating everything that she was doing. Usually, it was stuff like, "Now we're tidying up," or "We're going up the stairs." One day, all of a sudden, when her mom was minding her in her bedroom, it just changed to, "We're playing and the man is watching us." Apparently, she refused to sleep in there anymore, and they had to swap the bedrooms around. She had violent night terrors every single night. She talked about the man and could point to exactly where he supposedly stood. It was the same place every time, the corner of the bedroom. Eventually, it stopped. My girlfriend has no memory of it at all, and she hasn't had any weird or creepy paranormal experiences since, so it was probably just overreactive kid brain. She's always been an anxious person, but still creepy. We moved into a 100-plus-year-old house. My kid tell me about once a year about the ghosts that live here. The first time it happened, there was an older man in the dark hallway. He had on a top hat, or something like it. I told him the houses were expensive. We're broke as F and can't move. All of us and the ghosts will just have to live in harmony. Now they just casually bust out with some ghost shenanigans that have happened recently. I don't really believe it, but it's still kinda creepy. When my son was 5 and had a part-time kindergarten, I would walk to the school to get him. On the way home, he started talking about the other family. He would tell me about, "Before you, my mother would walk me. We had a garden, and there were lots of flowers." He would tell me the color of the house. It had a fence and describe his room all from before you. It was like he remembered a past life. "I didn't see you much before I was born. I see you all the time now," calmly stated out of the blue by a 3-year-old nephew. According to family lore, my mother was 5 when she mentioned that she could see through her aunt as she descended the staircase. Said aunt died a few days later, apparently natural causes, but the family felt uneasy about it. Not long after that, she said the same thing about another older family friend, and that she could see through her to the wall behind because she's much thinner now, like fabric. That person also died within days, and there was always a little distrust of her family after that. We bought a 130-year-old Victorian fixer-upper. I painted the family room a nice calming blue. I had been a weird shiny olive green color. My son woke up the next morning and told me, "The old man and I don't like it. The old man is mad because he liked the green." When asked what old man, my son replied, "He said this used to be his house," and he gestured as though the old guy was next to him. A few days later, I painted the guest room a blush color, and the accents one shade deeper. I did that while my kids were sleeping, so they had no idea until they were in. This time, My son told me the old man thought it was beautiful, and he was glad I was taking care of the house, but he still liked his green room. Not creepy at all. I only have the opposite. The kid had learned that to sleep with parents you can complain about being scared. First night he complained about the T-Rex in his bed. He had a large, loved such plushie in his bed. The second night, he complained about the rainbow snake that glowed. He had such Christmas lights in his room and had turned them on. We had a discussion that he didn't need to motivate getting in our bed other than needing cuddles. He stopped making up monsters after that. When Princess Diana died, my daughter was just about old enough to be allowed to go downstairs with her little brother, get a glass of milk for them both, and turn the TV on and watch cartoons, while me and my wife struggled to wake up and bargained over whose turn it was to get up and make breakfast for the kids. That morning, the usual TV programming was full of breaking news and the like, so there was no cartoons on the usual channel. She appeared at my bedside, silently at eye level, and when I opened my eyes, she whispered to me, "Daddy, someone has died." I nearly shit myself. This started when he was a toddler, but he'll still do it today. When he wanted me at night, he wouldn't wake me up like a normal child. He would just stand over me, staring at my closed eyes until I felt the weight of his presence and woke up. Scared the bejesus out of me every time. Same kid a few years later declared I was the best mother he ever had. I want that on my tombstone. When I used to live in the middle of the woods in the middle of nowhere, I'm babysitting my siblings and little cousins, and we're pretending to be having a party in the basement when my cousin suddenly turns white and tells us, "I saw a man walk in front of the window." You know those little windows at the top of the wall in the basements where you can only see people's feet or legs? I was the babysitter. I was a teen but had to take the role of responsible adult and go upstairs alone because everyone was too scared to come with me, and analyze the dark farce surrounding the house to see if there really was some stranger stalking us. To this day, no idea if he was hallucinating or if it was real. When I was 15, my across-the-street neighbor, who was, I'm guessing, around 5-ish at the time, crossed my path while I was walking my family's dog one afternoon and said, "You're the girl my daddy has all the photos of. Hi." They had moved in a couple of months prior, and we knew them, but not well. I was obviously confused and said, "Are you sure he has photos of me?" She replied with something like, "Yes, lots. He keeps them in a book. I've seen it in his room. Creep me the f*** out." I obviously told my mom, and she told me never to speak to him and to tell her immediately if he tried to talk to me. Long story short, a year or so later, I caught him prowling around in our backyard when I was home alone and saw him try and open the glass door to our house, which was locked, thankfully. Our dog was the sweetest, chonky boy, but a bully mix, and while usually a total angel, went absolutely feral attack mode and scared him off. We ended up moving several months after. Yes, I did make a police report. I know they went over and talked to him, but it was the usual small town BS of until we catch him in the act, not much we can do. Pre-security cameras being easily accessible, so we noped the hell out of the neighborhood. Never saw the photos, but occasionally I've remembered this time in my life and wondered when or how he was getting so many photos of me. Creepy as hell. I once babysat a 7-year-old who was a bit different. Not that I remember much, but she definitely stood out. It wasn't a big deal at the time. She loved playing with frogs and lizards. I swear she told me with a straight face that if anything happened to one of her frog friends, her nana would make sure I'd be sorry. Thing is, her nana had been dead for 2 years. LOL. I like this kid. She's 13 now. Red is my favorite color because it's the color of blood, said with a very sinister expression and villainous tone. It was definitely creepy. I half expected it to be followed by a cartoonesque maniacal laughter. He was too young to be saying it just for the sale of getting a reaction. It was definitely an organic and wholly unsolicited thought. Fortunately, I was able to steer it into a teachable moment by explaining to him that blood is actually blue until it hits the air, and showing him the visible blue hue of his veins. The child in question actually said nothing at all. He couldn't, as he was barely 6 months old, but his eyes said everything. I looked into them and saw a dangerous predator, someone who would inflict pain, misery, and yes, even kill. At the time I met this infant boy, the first son of a high school friend, I made the mistake of sharing my fears or instincts with a mutual friend who was angry I could suggest such a thing about an innocent baby. An understandable response, to be fair. Less than 5 years later, that innocent baby boy was caught SAing other kids and toddlers violently, horrifically, and he's just getting started in my opinion. That kid scared the crap out of me, and I was raised by a genuine psychopath. Make of that what you will.